You may have noticed that we didn't really talk too much about reading tables, at least not in the same way we did when we were talking about manipulating data in the earlier videos, and that's because we've already talked about reading table information, in the second video in fact. We talked about how we can list all of the tables in a database with the show tables command. And we also talked about how we can use describe or explain to actually learn about the contents of the tables and how they are structured. And that's really all there is to know about reading data from tables. And so now we're going to look at some problems. So first off, we're going to create a new table to store details about a meeting. We're then going to create a second table to store details about who attends the meeting. We're going to change the name of the first table, and then we're going to change one of the fields within the second table. We're then going to populate the first table before removing all of the data, and then we're going to delete both tables. So to begin with, to create a new table, we're going to call this one meeting info. And we're going to add a unique ID number. Which will be an integer of 20 length. And we're going to use this as our primary key. Next we're going to create the name of the meeting, which will be a varchar of 25. And now we're going to create a time field, meeting time, which will be of the data type time. And finally we will create the date of the meeting, which will be of the data type date. So if we run this and then also run show tables, we will see our new table has been created, meeting info here. And if we describe meeting info, we will also need to comment out the create instructions. But if we describe the meeting info, we'll obviously see all of the information that we need here. So I'll just go back and comment everything back out. Now our second task is to create a second table called staff meeting. And it's going to hold information about who actually attends the meeting. So we're going to have the staff number, which will be an integer. We will have the ID of the meeting as well, which will be an integer of 10 length. This should be the same name as what we've used up here. So unique ID number in this case, which is not a very good name for a column, because our column names should be unique to the actual database if possible, whereas unique ID number is only going to be unique to that actual table. And again, if we show tables and describe the staff meeting table, we will be able to see that we've now got staff meeting, and in our second one we can see that we've got our data for our staff meeting. So we'll comment this out again. Next up, we're going to change the name of our first table. So to do that, we need to use the alter command. We're going to alter the table which is currently called meeting info. And we're going to rename it to meeting details. Or rather, staff meeting. Because it's a link table between the staff and the meeting tables. So if we do this and then show the tables, you should have chosen a unique name. So now we've got meeting details. So we'll comment this out again. Next up, we're going to alter the meeting ID in the second table so that it matches the format of the meeting ID in the first table. So to do this, we're just going to alter meeting. This one's the staff meeting first, which is our second table. And we're going to change the meeting ID in the second table, which is called unique ID number. And we're going to change it to unique ID number of type integer 10. Or rather, it should be integer 20 so that it matches the first one. And then if we also describe the staff meeting table, we'll be able to see the results, which is the fact that this has changed to 20 instead of 10. So I'll comment this out. So just to recap the very first sort of instructions that we were doing when we were looking at data manipulation, we just need to insert into staff into meeting details. And remember, we can do multiple inserts at once. So we're just going to call this one test. Test 1. Another test. And because we haven't used an auto increment when we're assigning new meetings, which we should really have done, we also have to specify the actual meeting ID number. Because that's a primary key, and so you must specify the actual meeting unique ID number. And so if we comment that out and then select the details from the meeting details table, we'll be able to see our 3 new entries have been added. Now our next task is to remove all of the data from within the first table, which is our meeting details table, leaving the table itself intact. If you remember, we can either delete each of the individual records, we can delete the entire table before then reinstating the actual table itself and all of its columns and values, or we can use the truncate command. Table meeting details. And then if we select the data from the meeting details table, we will see that all of the data has now been deleted and the table remains intact. Our final task is to delete both tables, and if you remember from our previous lesson, this is just drop table and then the table name. So meeting details, drop table, staff meeting. And then we'll show tables again. And both of those tables have now been deleted. If any of what we've just done doesn't make sense to you, I would encourage you to go back over the last few videos again, just so that you can recap on what you've already learned. We're not really going to be touching the creation of tables or the manipulation of tables as a whole again throughout this series, and so it is important that you understand what you're doing when you're deleting and manipulating tables as a whole, as opposed to manipulating data itself. The commands do vary slightly, but they do have similar effects.